Hello everyone and welcome to day 4 of our Christmas series, where yet again we're going to be breaking down another insane Frost build for you guys, but this time with a bit of a twist. We're actually going to be looking into one of my favourite characters in the entire game, because as the title and the thumbnail suggests, we're going to be cosplaying as Blaidd. So if you're excited for that, make sure you hit that like button, and if you want to stay tuned for the rest of the videos that come out this week, definitely hit that subscribe button, because trust me, you're gonna want to know these upcoming builds. If you haven't seen the previous videos, don't worry, in the description is a link to the playlist so you can watch all of the episodes, and that way you don't miss out on these crazy builds. But for now, let's delve into how we can create this insanely overpowered Blaidd build. So of course, today we're going to be going over the Royal Greatsword, as that is Blaidd's weapon that he carries throughout the entire game. So if there was ever a point that you've seen him with this greatsword and you thought, wow, I definitely need to get my hands on that, well guess what? You can. Unfortunately though, the way we get that is by defeating Blaidd for the final time. After completing Ranni's quest and meeting her in the Moonlight Altar, we can then head back to Ranni's Rise, where Blaidd will be a bit rabid, still trying to defend anybody entering the tower. As a result, he will come for us, but once we defeat him, we will not only get his Royal Greatsword, but we'll also get his full armor set. Now, with this weapon being a greatsword, it's actually going to be fairly similar in terms of how we treated the Helfen Steeple. And what I mean by that is also using spells along with the weapon itself. Where there was a possibility of dual wielding the Helfen Steeple in the previous episode, there's not too much of a possibility with the Royal Greatsword, and that's mainly just down to the weight of the weapon itself. The Royal's Greatsword is much heavier, being 20 points towards the weight gain, whereas the Helfen Steeple was only 11.5. So of course, if we're dual wielding both of them, you've got 40 if you're using the Royal's Greatsword, and then only 23 if you were using 2 of the Helfen Steeples. So I would highly recommend that we definitely use spells and the sword this time around to save on the weight gain. But again, if you want to dual wield Blaidd's sword, you will have to complete the game again, complete Ranni's quest again, and defeat him again to get a second sword. But if you're like me and you just want to use the one, it is still extremely powerful to use, again being a massive stance breaking machine, and again what we lack for in range we can just utilize the spells similar to how we did in the previous video. But the caveat with this weapon is it has a very unique Ash of War, the Wolf's Assault. What this Ash of War does is fling you forward, again staggering your enemies before plunging the sword straight into the ground, damaging any enemies that are in the way. But then to top it all off, it then does a massive explosion of frost damage, affecting anybody within the near vicinity. If you can combine both of those attacks as you plunge into the ground, and then also follow up with that AoE attack, you'll do around about 2,500 damage to your enemies. Not only this, but again, depending on your enemies, you will either stagger them or knock them to the ground, allowing you to follow up with a heavy attack, again typically breaking their stances. This of course makes the weapon brilliant against the annoying bosses like the Crystallians, or quicker moving targets like the Black Knife Assassins, as you can just essentially stun lock them with the Ash of War. Of course, it is also great for crowd control, so if you're going through dungeons or just traversing through the lands between in general and get stuck, this Ash of War will essentially get you out of trouble 99% of the time. But like I say, this weapon does stagger enemies quite well, and will of course build up the frost damage when using the Ash of War, so you'll still be staggering even the harder bosses, dealing fairly decent damage as well in the meantime. And then if you want to implement spells on top of that, it just adds even more carnage to the damage output that you were already doing. Again, much like how I mentioned in the previous video, I would highly recommend using spells like any of the phalanxes, and I typically relied on the Glintstone Ice Crag to again hit enemies at range, proc the frost a little bit more, and then follow up with attacks with the weapon itself. And again, like I mentioned earlier, some of you might already know what's coming with the stats, as they're going to be fairly similar to the previous episode, but just to chuck those on screen once again for you, we have got 45 points in Vigor, 20 points in Mind, 24 in Endurance, 40 Strength, 20 dexterity, 60 intelligence, and then 10 in faith and arcane. Again, you know the drill, faith and arcane are the base stats, and the 20 dexterity is purely there to make sure that you can use the weapon, because I believe you need 18 to wield it, but the weapon itself scales better with strength and intelligence, and of course having 60 points in intelligence means that you've got a large range of spells to use. In fact, I think there's only 1 or 2 that you can't use with 60 intelligence, so you've pretty much got all of the options available to you. However, I did mention earlier that this is a very heavy weapon, so if you wanted to dual wield and power stance these weapons, you can do so. I would advise maybe taking a little bit off of intelligence and then pumping that into endurance just to make sure you've got a medium roll. But I'll be completely honest, this is definitely a better way to play this particular weapon, just because I feel dual wielding greatswords is a little bit too slow for my liking, and then also you'll be losing out on the range that you'd have with the spell, so I definitely advise delving into intelligence at least a little bit to not only buff the damage output but also give you an option with those spells. Of course, if you do want to do that, the talismans that I recommend you using with this particular build are as follows. So to utilize the best damage output with the Ash of War, of course, I'm going to advise using the Shard of Alexander, as that is pretty much just a given for any weapon that has an Ash of War that deals a butt ton of damage. Again, we've got the Magic Scorpion Charm to boost the damage output with the AoE effect at the end of the Ash of War, as well as our spells that we're using. And then of course we've got the Dragon Crest Greatshield to negate the increased damage we get whilst using the Scorpion Charm, and also just give us a bit of extra defense anyway. But then because my endurance is only 24, I am running the Great Jar's Arsenal to boost my equipment load to ensure that I have a medium roll with everything that you're seeing on screen. But his armor is also a little bit on the heavy side, so if you say wanted to change out and use a lighter armor set so you can use a different talisman aside from the Great Jar's Arsenal, then by all means do so. But if you want the full look whilst keeping minimal endurance to get the best damage output, then you will have to use the Great Jar's Arsenal. And then again, just to boost the damage output even more with the Wonder Physic, I would highly recommend using the Strength Knot tier to boost strength just a little bit more, whilst also using the Magic Shrouding Crack tier to again boost the damage of your spells and the AoE at the end of the Ash of War with the weapon. And then essentially with all that, you're good to go to cosplay as Blaidd himself. Normally, I'm not one to cosplay as certain characters in the game just because, I don't know, it's just something I don't do. But I know a lot of people do, and actually it was quite fun going around pretending that obviously I'm Blaidd himself, essentially playing Elden Ring with the idea that Blaidd becomes the Elden Lord. So it was pretty fun roaming around the lands between thinking that that's the case, and the fact that he has such a powerful weapon as well just added to the fun that I was having. But like I say, I rarely play as certain characters. I know you can obviously get Radahn's set, Brenala's set, pretty much any other boss in the entire game you can cosplay as. So I just wanted to ask the question to you guys, do you use other bosses or other NPCs' armors in Elden Ring? And also let me know if you've got any ways to improve this build. As always, I'm not the absolute best at the game, as the gameplay is showing, of course, so if you do have any other ways to make this build even better, by all means, let us know in the comments down below as well. But yeah, once again, we are at the end of another crazy build. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed this one. I know it's a little bit different because we're delving into an actual character and taking on like a certain persona in Elden Ring. We of course have 3 more days of this Christmas special to go, and in fact we are going to be covering the top 3 frost weapons in my opinion in the upcoming videos. So if you're excited for that, obviously make sure you stay tuned. We of course are here 8 PM daily each day UK time, so make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification bell so that way you definitely don't miss out. But yeah, before I go on too much, I'm gonna let you guys go. So thank you again for watching. I hope you're doing well, and I hope you have a great festive holiday, guys. But I guess for now, I'll catch you in tomorrow's video. Bye bye.